It was supposed to be a celebration. My sister's graduation dinner, a private room at an expensive downtown restaurant. Candlelight, monogrammed napkins, wine glasses clinking. That kind of thing. My mom booked the place herself and made sure everyone knew it. "Only the best for my baby," she kept saying over and over like a campaign slogan. There were 16 of us around that table. Cousins, aunts, a few of my sister's college friends. My uncle even flew in from Atlanta. And me. I sat near the end of the table, 2 seats down from the birthday girl. Not close enough to be in the spotlight, not far enough to be invisible. I brought flowers. Yellow tulips, my sister's favorite. Paid for them myself, even though my paycheck had dropped short that week because of a late freelance client. When I handed her the bouquet, my sister Danielle smiled and said, "Oh, thanks, Janelle. That's sweet." That was it. No hug, no eye contact after, just a casual toss to the empty chair next to her where the flowers sat until the waiter moved them. But I didn't come for credit. I came because I thought maybe, just maybe, this time would feel different. It didn't. The room buzzed with conversation and toasts. My mom ordered 3 bottles of wine, passed them down the table, then leaned into Danielle and asked, "You're getting the lamb, right? The chef recommended it." I reached for a breadstick and accidentally knocked over my water glass. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't spill on anyone. Just a quiet splash onto the tablecloth. I grabbed my napkin, dabbed it up, and laughed nervously. I said, smiling, "Sorry, slippery fingers." The chatter paused. Heads turned, not dramatically, just that half-second of collective silence when someone notices you've messed up. Then I heard my mom's voice. My mom said loud and clear, "And that's why your sister is the favorite." The table erupted into laughter. It wasn't cruel laughter, not overtly. Just that awkward, social kind. The kind where people laugh because they don't know what else to do. Danielle laughed too, covering her mouth like she was embarrassed for me, not by me. And I smiled. Because what else was I supposed to do? I smiled and pretended it didn't slice right through my chest. I said quietly, "Wow, okay." My mom chuckled and added, "Oh, relax, you're so sensitive. It's a joke." But it wasn't a joke. It was a message that had been playing on loop my entire life. Just this time, it came out loud, public, unfiltered. I excused myself to the restroom and stayed in there for 15 minutes. I wasn't crying. I refused to cry. I just needed the walls, the silence. A moment where no one was watching me pretend it didn't hurt. But before I get back to my story, let me know in the comments where you're from, because I would love to know that my story is reaching different places. Also, if you enjoy, subscribe. It will really help the story reach more people. When I came back to the table, the server had cleared my plate. No one had noticed I was gone. My seat was there, empty, untouched. Danielle looked up and said, "Oh, did you want the rest of your risotto?" I wasn't sure. I shook my head. I said, "No, I'm good." I wasn't. I sat for another 10 minutes, listening to stories about Danielle's academic awards, her internship at that big financial firm, how proud everyone was of her. And I was proud too. Danielle worked hard, she always had. But somewhere between the dessert menu and the 3rd round of wine, my mom clinked her glass with her spoon and stood up. My mom announced, "I just want to say how proud I am of Danielle. She's everything I prayed for, brilliant, beautiful, graceful. She's made this whole family proud." The whole table clapped. I smiled again. Smiling had become a second skin by then, automatic, like muscle memory. My mom went on, "You know, raising 2 daughters isn't easy, but I always said, Danielle's gonna make it, she's going places." She didn't mention me, not even once, not a word, not a glance, like I wasn't even her daughter. That was the moment something in me went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that hopes, the kind that closes a door. After the bill was paid and the goodbyes began, I pulled Danielle aside near the coat check. I said to her, "Congrats again, really. I hope you celebrate big." Danielle smiled and replied, "Thanks. You coming back to Mom's after this?" I shook my head. I said, No, I've got work early. But tell everyone I said goodnight. She nodded, then paused. Danielle added, Don't take that comment too seriously, okay? You know how she gets with wine. I said softly, It wasn't the wine. She meant it. Danielle didn't argue. She just gave a tight smile, turned back toward the group, and rejoined the laughter. I walked out into the cold night air and pulled my jacket tighter around me. It wasn't the first time I'd been treated like a second-class guest in my own family. It wasn't the first time I'd been reminded that no matter how hard I tried, I was never going to be Danielle. But it was the first time I didn't try to fix it. I didn't text my mom later. I didn't pretend I was fine. I didn't show up the next day for brunch. I didn't offer to help clean up the party decorations or message everyone thank you notes. I just let the silence sit. Because something had shifted inside me at that table. It was small, quiet, but solid. A decision. I told myself, this was the last time. The last time I smiled through humiliation. The last time I let them shrink me in public. The last time I waited for the apology that would never come. I wasn't Danielle, I never would be. But I was done apologizing for that. Done chasing the love that came with conditions. Done being the daughter they only acknowledged when it was convenient. And that night, for the first time in my life, I didn't cry about it. I just walked away. And this time, I wasn't coming back. They say when you grow up in a family where love is conditional, you learn to earn it instead of expect it. I stopped expecting it a long time ago. But for years, I still kept trying to earn it. My sister Danielle and I are only 2 years apart. When we were little, people said we looked alike. But the similarities ended there. Danielle was bubbly, graceful, always smiling in that way people find magnetic. I was quieter, more observant. I asked too many questions and spoke my mind too often for my mother's taste. My mom used to say, Danielle's soft, you're sharp. She didn't mean it as a compliment. Birthdays were always a reminder. When Danielle turned 12, she had a glow-in-the-dark skating party, a custom cake shaped like a ballet slipper, and a brand new bike waiting in the driveway. When I turned 12, my mom said, Money's tight this year. Let's keep it simple. I got a store-bought cake and a pair of jeans, half a size too big. I asked my mom, Did you keep the receipt? My mom replied, You'll grow into them. Stop being ungrateful. That word, ungrateful, followed me for years. It was her favorite weapon. Danielle got compliments for her report cards. I got questions about why I wasn't more like her. My mom used to say to me at least once a month, Your sister never talks back. Why can't you just be easy? When I made the honor roll in 8th grade, I brought the certificate home beaming. I told my mom, I did it. Straight A's. She glanced at it, barely looked up from folding laundry. My mom said, Well, Danielle got hers a week ago, so she still beat you. Danielle was always the benchmark. Not because she asked to be, but because my mother needed there to be a golden child. And she needed me to know it wasn't me. Even the little things added up. Danielle could stay out late. I had a curfew. Danielle got the bigger room. I got the one next to the laundry. Danielle got help with her science fair projects. I got, figure it out yourself. That's what makes you so independent, right? If we fought, I was the one who got blamed. My mom would point at me and say, You're older, you should know better. I used to say back, I'm 2 years older, that doesn't make me wrong. My mom would snap, It makes you responsible, now apologize. Danielle never told me to stop. Never corrected our mom. She wasn't cruel, not directly. But she was complicit. She accepted the perks. Let them build her up, even if it meant I had to be the one they stood on. The one time she tried to defend me, we were in high school. I had stayed late at a club meeting and forgot to call. I came home to my mom furious, pacing the kitchen. My mom yelled at me, Do you think I'm your servant? I've been worried sick. Danielle stepped in and said, Mom, it's not that serious. Janelle just lost track of time. My mom turned on her like a light switch. My mom snapped at Danielle. "Don't you dare defend her. She's not your problem." And that was that. Danielle never defended me again. I learned how to be invisible, how to shrink, how to anticipate needs before anyone asked, how to keep my tone soft, my mouth shut, my face blank. In college, when I got into my dream program with a partial scholarship, I came home over break to tell them. I was buzzing with pride. I said at dinner, "I got in, out of state tuition, but I'll figure it out. I already have a work study lined up." Danielle said, "That's amazing. You really deserve it." She smiled, genuine. I believed her. My mom? She didn't even pause chewing. My mom said, "Out of state? Why would you put that burden on yourself? Danielle got a full ride. Maybe you should have tried harder." I didn't mention it again. I went anyway. Took out loans, got 3 jobs, finished early. Graduation came and no one from my family showed up. My mom said on the phone, "Flights were expensive. Danielle had finals. You understand?" I said quietly, "Sure, I understand." And I did. I understood that I could show up and it wouldn't matter. I could achieve and it would never be enough. I could bleed effort and still be the shadow to Danielle's light. That's not to say I never had good moments with them. Danielle and I had late-night talks sometimes. We'd laugh about dumb movies. She even cried on my shoulder once after a breakup. And my mom, she had soft days too. She once made me tea when I had a fever, stayed up with me till the Tylenol kicked in. But those moments were rare, fleeting, always drowned out by the sound of her voice saying, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" I wasn't angry all the time. Mostly, I was tired. Tired of trying to earn something that should have been freely given. Tired of measuring my worth in how quietly I could carry everyone else's expectations. Tired of pretending that the favoritism didn't chip away at me year after year until I didn't even recognize my own reflection. By the time the restaurant humiliation happened, the "that's why your sister is the favorite" comment, I wasn't shocked. I was just empty. It wasn't the first insult. It was the last one I was willing to sit through. I realized that night that love that asks you to vanish isn't love. It's control. And I was done being the daughter they only remembered when it was time to set the table, run the errands, or take the blame. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted myself back. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to go find her. The day after the dinner, I didn't cry. I didn't draft a long text. I didn't call to explain myself. I didn't argue, plead, or try to make them see what they'd done. I just got quiet. Not the kind of quiet they were used to, timid, obedient, shrinking. This was different. It was silence with a spine. I opened my phone and unfollowed all of them. My mother, Danielle, the cousins who liked to comment on how strong I was for putting up with everything. I said aloud to myself, "No more updates, no more invitations, no more access." And just like that, the tether was cut. I didn't block anyone. Not because I wanted them to reach out, but because I wanted them to sit with the fact that I didn't care if they did. That was the beginning of something I'd never had before. Space. Real space. Space without performance, without pressure, without having to mold myself into whatever version of acceptable they were selling that day. I took a week off work and turned off every notification on my phone. I didn't post anything. I didn't comment on their posts. I didn't need to be seen anymore. I needed to see myself. It started small. I reorganized my apartment, cleaned out every drawer, burned old photos I'd never liked of myself, forced smiles next to Danielle in matching outfits I never picked out. I donated the dress I wore to that dinner. I never wanted to see it again. Then I went further. I quit my job. My boss Karen said over the phone, "Janelle, are you sure? You've got seniority here. You're in line for a promotion." I replied, "I'm sure. I've been surviving. I want to try building." Karen said, "Do you have something lined up?" I answered, "Not yet, but I've got ideas." I hung up and felt something inside me exhale. For the first time, I wasn't chasing stability for someone else's comfort. I was choosing risk for my own growth. The idea had been sitting in the back of my head for over a year. A consulting business for women launching service-based brands, designers, writers, digital coaches. People like me who had the skills but didn't know how to scale. I'd done it all for others, quietly, under someone else's name. Now I wanted to do it for myself. I filed the paperwork that week. The business name I chose? Second Draft Strategies, because that's what I was. A second draft, cleaned up, no longer written to please anyone but myself. I started with no followers, no clients, no fanfare. Just a laptop, a small savings account, and 10 years of undervalued talent. The first few weeks were terrifying. There were nights I stared at my bank app, wondering if I'd made a mistake. Nights I heard my mother's voice in my head saying, "Why would you do something so unstable?" Nights I imagined Danielle shaking her head with that sad, patient smile saying, "Well, it's not for everyone." But those voices got quieter each time I chose myself again. I worked 12-hour days, built my own site, wrote every piece of copy, sent cold emails to people I'd admired from afar. Some said no, some ignored me, but one said yes, then another, then 3. I reinvested every dollar, took online business courses, learned how to run ads. Slowly, quietly, I grew. Within 6 months, I had a wait list. Within a year, I was making more than I had in any salaried job. And no one in my family knew, because I didn't tell them. I didn't post about my wins. I didn't send links. I didn't call to say, "Look at me now." That wasn't the point. The point was, I was finally living a life that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone. A life built entirely on my own terms. I learned how to cook for myself, not just fast meals, but real, slow meals with flavor and intention. I found a therapist who didn't ask me to justify my feelings, just helped me untangle them. I started boxing twice a week, hit things, sweated out years of swallowed anger. And the best part? I didn't have to explain any of it. I didn't have to water it down. Didn't have to translate my choices into language that would make my mother proud. Didn't have to soften my edges to keep Danielle comfortable. I was becoming a person I actually liked. Not a version of me they tolerated. The kind of woman who didn't need the room to clap, because she knew she'd built the room herself. I still got texts sometimes, generic ones. Danielle once texted, "Hope you're doing okay, haven't seen you around." I didn't respond. My mom sent a message around Thanksgiving. "You're always welcome at the table, Janelle. We're family." I read it, smiled, and put my phone away. Because the truth was, I'd finally built a table of my own, and I wasn't saving them a seat. The first message came on a Tuesday. It had been almost 2.5 years since that dinner, the night my mother said out loud what I'd always known in silence. Since then, I'd cut contact completely. No texts, no calls. I hadn't visited for the holidays, I hadn't shown up for birthdays, I hadn't reached out once, and neither had they. Until that Tuesday. Danielle texted, "Hey stranger, hope you're doing well. Just saw a post from one of your clients. Your work looks amazing. Super proud of you. Let's catch up sometime." I stared at the screen, unmoved. The compliment was nice enough. The proud of you felt easy, breezy, effort-free. But what stood out most was the fact that Danielle had never once commented on any of my wins before this. Not when I'd launched, not when I'd been tagged in interviews, not when I'd posted about expanding my team. She hadn't even followed me. But now, suddenly, she wanted to catch up. I didn't respond. I let the message sit there, glowing unread, while I poured myself a cup of tea and got back to reviewing onboarding forms for a new client. I'd learned that attention isn't affection, and timing reveals motive. 2 days later, I got another message, this one from my mother. My mother texted, "Janelle, it's your mom. I saw your name on LinkedIn. Sounds like you're doing very well. I'd love to hear your voice. It's been too long." Too long. As if time had slipped away like a forgotten timer on the stove, not like she had pushed me to the edge of the table and acted shocked when I finally stood up and walked out. Still, I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally peaceful. And sometimes peace means not picking at old wounds just because someone else is suddenly itchy. A week later, Danielle tried again. Danielle messaged, "Mom's been asking about you a lot. She's not great at expressing things, but I think she regrets how everything happened. We miss you. Just putting that out there." I read that one twice. The part about regret almost made me soften. Almost. But then I remembered every time she'd watched me get dismissed. Every time she'd watched me get handed scraps while she got praise. Every time she chose to stay silent. I whispered to myself, "Missing me doesn't mean you're entitled to me." I left the message unread. No reply. That weekend, I got a phone call. My mother's name lit up on the screen. For a full 10 seconds, I just stared at it ringing. I didn't panic. I didn't tremble. I just watched it. Watched her name flash and buzz and demand space it hadn't earned. And then calmly, I let it go to voicemail. No guilt, no internal war, just a quiet knowing. I didn't owe her my voice. Later, I listened to the message once. My mother said in the voicemail, "Hi Janelle, I hope you're well. I know we've had our differences, and I'm not always the best with words, but I want to make things right. Danielle is getting married in a few months. I'd love for you to be involved. It would mean a lot." There it was. Not an apology, not accountability, just an invitation, wrapped in convenience, framed as love. She wanted me back for a milestone, a family moment, a photo op, something she could post online with the caption, "My girls, together again." But what about all the years in between? What about the birthdays I spent alone? The business wins she never asked about? The grief I processed in therapy instead of in her arms? I deleted the voicemail. Not out of spite, just out of clarity. They hadn't changed. They just noticed the silence. And they didn't like what it said. But I did. The silence had become my sanctuary. It had taught me that love isn't proven by blood. It's proven by behavior. And behavior doesn't lie. I didn't block them. I didn't write a dramatic letter. Didn't post a quote about boundaries. Didn't make a speech about healing. I just stayed gone. Because for the first time, I had the power to choose who got access to me, and I was choosing wisely. The calls slowed down, the messages spaced out. Eventually, they stopped altogether. And it didn't hurt. It felt like closure. Or maybe just completion. Because it was never about vengeance. I didn't want them to suffer. I didn't want payback. I just wanted to stop bleeding for a family that never noticed the cuts. And I had. I was no longer their afterthought. I wasn't their scapegoat. Wasn't their shame. Wasn't their emotional sponge. Wasn't the quiet sister who stood in the shadow of their pride. I was me. Whole, untethered, unapologetic, and finally, free. The venue was a loft-style event space in the heart of the city, exposed brick, high ceilings, warm amber lighting, the kind of place you book when you've built something worth celebrating. And I had. After nearly 3 years of growing my business in silence, I was finally hosting my first public event, a Women in Business Summit, fully funded and produced by me. Speakers, panels, catered brunch, a networking lounge with velvet chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows. Every detail was mine. It wasn't about showing off. It was about creating space. Space for women like me who had been overlooked, underestimated, talked over. Women who were rebuilding, rebranding, and reclaiming. The summit had been in planning for nearly a year. Tickets sold out in 3 days. We had over 200 attendees. My name wasn't splashed all over the flyers, not intentionally. It was listed in the fine print, down at the bottom of the event site. Presented by Second Draft Strategies, founded by Janelle R. Lyons. I didn't expect my family to come. I didn't invite them. But somehow, they did. I was backstage, checking in with the AV tech, when my assistant walked up and whispered, "Hey, just letting you know. I think your mom is here, and your sister." I blinked. I asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded and said, "They're at the back, registered under Danielle's company." I took a breath, held it, let it out slowly. Then I smiled. I said, "Okay, let them in." No drama, no panic, no performance. I didn't need to prepare myself, because this was my world now, and I wasn't hiding. The opening panel began 15 minutes later. A powerhouse group of women shared the stage, talking about funding, burnout, brand voice, and the fear of starting over. I stood at the side, microphone in hand, listening. Then the host introduced me. The host said into the mic, "Now, please welcome the woman who made all of this happen, founder, strategist, and champion of second chances, Janelle R. Lyons." Applause erupted. I stepped onto the stage. I didn't scan the crowd for them. I didn't need to. But I knew they saw me. I could feel it in the way the applause faltered for half a second, just long enough for someone in the back to whisper, "Wait, that's her?" I smiled, clear and steady. I said into the mic, "Thank you. 3 years ago, I was burnt out, broke, and invisible. Today, I'm honored to stand here as someone who chose to rebuild, not for applause, but for peace." The audience clapped again. I didn't rush. I took my time. I belonged here. After the keynote, I stayed at the networking lounge for a while, talking to attendees, signing copies of the workbook we'd produced, taking photos. The buzz was loud, energizing, healing. That's when I saw them. Danielle approached first. She was dressed like she always was. Flawless makeup, sleek blazer, effortlessly polished. Her expression was confused, impressed, and something else. Something I couldn't quite name. Danielle said, "Wow, this is unbelievable. You did all this?" I nodded and said, "Yes, every part of it." She glanced around at the banners, the camera crews, the buzzing crowd. Danielle said quietly, "I had no idea." I replied, "That was intentional." She looked at me for a long moment, then she smiled. Danielle said, "It's incredible, Janelle. I'm proud of you." Her voice was sincere, not overly warm, not dramatic, but real. I gave her a small smile. I said, "Thanks, I'm proud of me too." She stepped aside. My mother followed. She looked unsettled, not angry, not bitter, but off balance, like she'd entered a museum and suddenly realized one of the exhibits was her daughter. My mom said, "I didn't know you were behind this. Danielle just saw the event link and said it looked interesting. I had no idea." She trailed off, eyes still scanning the room. I said flatly, "That's kind of the theme, isn't it?" Her gaze snapped back to mine. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. My mom said, "This is impressive, really. I just didn't know you were doing so much." I replied, "Because you never asked." She flinched, only slightly, but I saw it. We stood there in silence for a moment, the noise of the room swirling around us like static. Then she stepped forward and reached out, resting her hand lightly on my arm. My mom said softly, "Janelle, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you weren't enough." I didn't blink, I didn't flinch, I didn't cry. I just held her gaze and let the silence do the work. Then I said, "You didn't make me feel that way. You told me." She let her hand fall. She whispered, "I didn't mean to." I answered, "But you did." A pause. Then I added, gently but clearly, I said, "You don't get to show up in my spotlight now and act like you helped turn it on." Her eyes filled. She nodded. My mom said quietly, "I just wanted to be here." I replied, "Then be here, as a guest." I stepped past her and walked back toward the main floor. I didn't look back. Because this moment wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't about finally being seen. It was about the fact that I'd already seen myself, and that was enough. They hadn't given me the spotlight. So I built a stage. And when they finally stepped into my world, all I did was let them look around. Not out of revenge, but out of truth. This is who I've always been. They just weren't ready to see it. Until now. The messages started the next day. I wasn't surprised. People always want to talk after the show. Danielle texted, Yesterday was amazing. You were amazing. Let me know when we can get coffee. Just us. I miss you. I stared at the screen for a full minute before locking it. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel much at all. It was strange. Reading the words I used to dream of hearing, the ones I'd written in my journal over and over. I'm proud of you. I miss you. I'm sorry. But now that they were here, I felt still. Not numb, not bitter. Just still. Like someone watching waves crash from the shore, not scared anymore, just aware. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mom. She wrote, "I'm sorry, Janelle, truly. I've spent the last day realizing how little I knew about you, and how much I chose not to ask. You deserved better. I know that now." She added a second message. My mom added, "I know it doesn't undo things, but I'd like a chance to rebuild, to really know you, if you'll let me." I sat with that one for a long time. My younger self would have clung to it, rushed to reply, forgiven instantly just to hear those words. You mattered. But I wasn't her anymore. I was the version of me who built something out of silence, who stopped trying to convince people she was worthy of space and just took it. I typed a reply, then deleted it, then typed again, then deleted it again. Eventually, I left it unanswered, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I didn't need it. The next day, Danielle called. I didn't let it go to voicemail this time. I answered, but I didn't speak first. Danielle said quietly, "Hey, I wasn't sure if you'd pick up. Thanks for that." I stayed silent. Danielle added, She's been crying a lot. She says she's sorry every 5 minutes. I told her it's not just about one moment, it's years." I let her keep talking. Danielle continued, "I wanted to say it too. I'm sorry, Janelle. I should have stood up more. I should have seen more. I don't know why I didn't." I finally said, "You didn't want to lose what you had." She was quiet for a beat. Then, softly, Danielle said, "You're right." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I said, "I'm not angry at you, not anymore. But I'm not walking back into that dynamic either. I can't." Danielle asked gently, "What does that mean?" I said calmly, "It means I'm not going to pretend like everything's fine just because the truth finally made you uncomfortable." She exhaled. Danielle said, "I figured, I just didn't want to say nothing." I replied, "Then thank you. For saying something. I heard you." There was a pause. Then she spoke again. Danielle said, "Are we okay?" I looked out the window. The sky was soft and pale, the kind of color that doesn't decide whether it's gray or blue. I said carefully, "We're not okay, but we're not what we were, and that's all right." She didn't argue. She just said goodbye. And I appreciated that more than any apology. A week passed, then 2. I kept working, kept writing, kept investing in the women who showed up for each other without needing applause. The family went quiet again, and I was fine with it, because something had shifted for good, not in them, in me. They had finally said the things I used to ache for, but I was already standing in a life that didn't require their approval to feel real. I had already moved on from needing their permission to thrive. I got the closure I thought I needed. And when it came, it didn't break me. It didn't heal me either. It just confirmed that I was already whole. I used to think healing would feel like fireworks, like one big thunderous moment when the pain cracked open and was replaced with light. But that's not what it was like. Healing felt more like a quiet walk through an empty house. Room by room, I turned off the lights, closed the doors, and left. Now I live in Lisbon. Not forever, but for now. I've been here 6 months. The apartment I rent sits above a tiny cafe that sells the best pastel de nata I've ever tasted. I walk to the coast every morning, drink espresso at the same window seat, and write in a journal I never show anyone. I teach a private workshop twice a week for immigrant women starting online businesses. I mentor 2 young founders in Nairobi via Zoom. I I read novels without checking my phone. I cook slow dinners with rosemary and lemon. I take up space without apology. And when the phone rings now, I don't flinch. Sometimes my mother texts. The messages are soft now, carefully worded, edited for kindness. She once wrote, "Thinking of you, no expectations, just sending love." I replied, "Thank you." Other times, I don't reply, not out of malice, just because I don't owe anyone my presence anymore, especially not the people who only started valuing it after they felt its absence. Danielle sends updates occasionally, photos from her honeymoon, links to articles she's reading, a short message last month that said, "Miss you." I replied with a heart. Nothing more, because we're not broken anymore, but we're not what we were, and that's okay. There's a peace in not forcing things back into shape. Some connections are meant to stay stretched out, quiet reminders of who we were, not demands to return there. Sometimes I wonder how different things would have been if they'd treated me with love from the beginning. If I'd been the favorite, if I'd been cherished instead of tolerated, lifted up instead of used as the lesson, listened to instead of managed. But I don't stay there long. Because the truth is, I'm not sure I'd be this version of myself if they had. I might have become smaller, safer, dependent on their praise. Instead, I became me. Not in reaction to them, but in release of them. And I like this me. She's strong, but not hard. Quiet, but not hidden. Successful, but not performative. And free. That's the word I come back to most. Free. Free from trying to explain my worth. Free from waiting for someone else to recognize it. Free from contorting myself into a shape they'd finally love. They had their favorite. And I had myself. There's no resentment left. No bitterness. Just space. Space to live. Space to become. Space to choose. I don't need to walk back into that family system. I don't need their validation or their comfort or even their apologies, because I gave myself everything they didn't. I believed myself, chose myself, backed myself, loved myself, and no title, no favorite, no first, no forgotten can take that away from me. They had their favorite, but I had freedom, and that, finally, is enough. The end. Do you think I overreacted? Or would you've done the same thing? Let me know in the comments.